Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and we need to talk about this major global food crisis, which is on its way right now. Everything happening in the world right this second is moving us towards a global food crisis of which we have not experienced in our lifetime. This is going to be a very big deal, and most people are not even close to prepared enough for it. And we know that this is happening soon as we're seeing movements occur throughout the world that would point to these shortages showing up here in the relative future. And if things don't change very quickly, we're going to have a very challenging time here ahead of us. Germany has reported that this coming week, 20 to 50% food price increases are expected in all of their supermarket chains. That's a huge increase in prices. And the problem with what's happening with this global food crisis might have something to do with supply, but a lot of it's going to have to do with the fact that the cost is so high that most people cannot afford to operate the way they need to when it comes to consumption, okay? Aldi Nord, which is a supermarket conglomerate, said that since the start of the conflict overseas, there have been price jumps that they have never experienced before. And obviously they're a huge supermarket conglomerate, and for them to come out and say that should definitely tell you something. Now understand that 4 Greek supermarket chains have already begun rationing different items within their stores, and especially related to flour and sunflower oil, which are both commodities that come out of the area of conflict right now and could easily create that cascading effect for the rest of the world. And what we're seeing happening in Greece could easily happen in any other part of the world. And actually it is. So Spain's government has just allowed its grocery stores to put limitations on purchase quantities of many other goods. And they recently ran out of sunflower oil for obvious reasons, but also milk. And these are commodities that we're used to having access to. And especially when it comes to sunflower oil, you might not realize how many products actually contain it. When it comes to potato chips or cookies or a million other things that are on the shelf, that product is basically going to go away for a period of time or maybe forever, depending on how this whole situation plays out. We also have France considering food vouchers for lower to middle income class families. And that's huge because generally food vouchers go hand in hand with rationing, and at the same time, they are trying to say that the middle class is going to need them just as much as the lower class. And that's an admission that you should definitely be paying attention to, because generally the middle class has been able to feed itself relatively easily, at least in comparison to lower income families. And yet France is saying they're going to need food vouchers here very soon, okay? The USDA reports that food prices are increasing higher than at any other point in the last 40 years. And that's just them telling you exactly what's happening. And if you don't see what's happening, you have to understand that a lot of the information being put out there right now is surrounding the idea that, these price increases are there, but the shortages aren't really a problem. The supply is there, the food exists, but we just can't really afford it. It just costs a little bit too much. And that should tell you something, because in all honesty, do you really believe that that's the case, especially with the prices we're seeing suddenly surge at all of our grocery stores here in the US, as well as in any other westernized country? Now, General Mills CFO Kofi Bruce admits that their company is seeing acute shortages. So they're saying it, they're telling us that even a big company like General Mills is having shortages, and yet you'll see a lot of spin out there about the fact that these price increases have nothing to do with shortages. And in fact, General Mills generally can provide 99% of its products to anyone who orders them, and right now they're only operating at 70% of level of demand, which means they can't meet the demand. They're down 30% from what they can usually meet in the sense of demand of their products. That's huge. 30% of food just gone, if you think of it in that regard, is a big, big deal. Imagine 30% of the population not being able to eat. And these are all indicators that are coming out right now and telling us exactly what we should be expecting. And yet many people are pushing it off to the side, saying that it's not really a big deal, that these shortages and these food price increases are just a temporary thing that will go away here very soon, especially if that conflict was to somehow resolve itself. But I'm here to tell you that that is a bad way to prepare. That is not the type of planning that you should be relying on. Just assuming this is going to get better just because it sounds like something that could not happen is not a good way to go. Keep in mind that these things have happened before in many other countries and many other places, including the United States during the 1930s, and yet we're still acting like it can't happen here. This is happening here. And when General Mills can't meet 30% of the demand it usually does, that's a huge indicator. And when you see Grocery stores in other countries that are closer to a conflict zone having to ration supplies, put purchase limitations on certain quantities, and at the same time raise their prices by 20 to 50%, you have to have the expectation that we're going to see similar things here in the United States. And understand why this is so important. It's not just about people starving and such, because in many ways there are a lot of support systems in place to try to avoid any mass starvation or famine type scenario. However, most Americans live paycheck to paycheck right now. 64% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. How do you expect those people to afford a 20 to 50% increase in their food? And if 64% of the population, which is basically 2/3, suddenly can't afford to eat, what do you expect to happen in society? What do you think will happen to our culture when 2/3 of the population is not meeting their basic necessities for quality of life? It's going to cause a lot of issues, and it's going to show up in a very negative way, especially here very soon in the near future if things don't change. So you need to be aware of this major food crisis. It's not always about production. It's not always about logistics. It's not always about the supply itself. But the cost matters. And when food is so expensive, people can no longer afford it, and it has to be rationed, and vouchers have to be provided from the government. That's just a stopgap measure to basically keep people from panicking. And when that panic starts is when things really go downhill really fast. So we need to pay attention to this, and you need to be ready for it. And as you can see, ordering canned goods and preserved foods is probably a good thing to do right now. And having shelf-stable, sustainable foods is going to get you through these tough times, especially if you find yourself in a situation where you suddenly can't afford to eat either. And that's why prepping is such a big deal, and why we all need to be doing more with it as every single day passes with the current state of the world. So I wanted to go ahead and bring this information to your attention. If you have anything else to add about the looming food crisis that is definitely on its way, leave it in the comments below. Tell people some ideas maybe about what you're doing to hedge you and your family against this looming food issue that is definitely coming very soon here. And if you have ideas for people who maybe are tight on their budget already, or already paycheck to paycheck and maybe can't afford to do much else, give them those ideas so that we as a community can be better prepared together and hopefully not have to deal with each other after it all goes up. So, without anything else to say about it, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.